Did the Steelers always believe that you had to build your roster through the draft?
Hardly. There was a period in the late 50s and early 60s where the Steelers were trading draft picks away in bunches and into the future, too. In 1958, traded their first, fourth, and fifth round draft picks in that draft. Then in 59, traded the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. In 1961, traded the first round pick, and they traded their third, fourth, fifth, sixth. 1963, the Steelers did not have a draft pick until the eighth round.
The NFL draft is a tool that can be used to build for the future or to cash in on the now.
And it's intercepted down on the Steeler 26.
The Steelers tested each approach over 2 decades, from 1957 to 1979, with wildly different results. You're about to hear how the team's draft philosophy shifted from then personnel director Art Rooney Jr. and some of the Super Bowl winning players who were there.
At Forbes Field in Pittsburgh, the Steelers' Ottman fumbles. Jerry Cowig snatches up the loose pigskin and romps in to pay dirt. And making the final score, Eagles 34, Steelers 13.
My dad was a diehard Steeler fan and would lament every time in the third and fourth quarter where they'd play tough and then finally lose the game in the fourth quarter.
The Steelers were not very good football team.
And splits the uprights with a 33-yard field goal. It's a heartbreaker for Pittsburgh.
You know, it was like the same old Steelers or something like that.
Those years weren't so good, but they were tough.
To shake up the same old Steelers in the late 1950s, owner Art Rooney Sr., affectionately known as the Chief, hired 2-time NFL champion coach Buddy Parker to become the 11th head coach since the team was founded in 1933.
He was a brilliant coach and made great use of the projector, the films and that stuff, and probably was kind of early in that. He said, you have to remember a couple of things. Get the great quarterback and some good receivers for him to toss the ball to, and the rest of it. The rest of it is defense, defense, defense.
When Buddy Parker parted ways in the 1965 preseason, he was the winningest coach in the brief history of this franchise. But, Buddy Parker was very much a coach who believed, as did many people in the league, that the coach should be in total control of every aspect of the football operations for a team.
I found out when I came to Pittsburgh, his methodology was he wanted veteran players. So he traded away draft choices and picked up veteran players.
We never had draft choices. It was currency for him. The currency to pick up other players. Getting guys who probably had some personality trait or were a little bit over the hill and maybe way over the hill.
After 8 seasons, Parker was responsible for trading 29 draft picks in the first 5 rounds alone. 3 Hall of Famers were selected from those picks. Ever hear of Dick Butkus? Yeah, he could have wore the black and gold.
And so as Dan Rooney became more and more involved in various aspects of the football operations, he told Buddy Parker, no more cutting and trading guys without my approval. Buddy Parker walked into Dan Rooney's office and said, if I don't have total control over the football operations, trading and cutting players, I can't work here anymore. Dan Rooney said, I accept your resignation, and the Steelers moved on.
The ramifications of Parker's draft strategy forced the Steelers to endure 4 awful seasons with a paper-thin roster. This became the start of the Steelers turning to the draft as their primary method of roster building.
The team that was doing so great with the draft was the Rams, and Dallas just came in, and they were doing all the great things and building their teams, through the draft. And that is who Brother Dan and I emulated, try to find out everything we could what they were doing, and when we could do it. But the thing that happened when we started to get the bigger money from television, that allowed us to do more things like into the personnel department.
With more importance on scouting than ever before, Art Rooney Jr. and his staff began the process of documenting the evaluations of hundreds of players every year. These scouting reports, which are kept at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, haven't been seen in almost 50 years.
I thought and hoped these things all had died.
So who was that?
Joe Green should be able to develop into a fine player. Gets off with the ball good, strong, fine balance.
Okay, let me see here. Uh-oh, he didn't put the E on my name. He hustles, very strong, quick as a big cat. Forces opponents to double team him. Probably one of the best pass rushers I've seen in college.
Real good job of rushing the passer. Puts out all the time.
Has all the equipment to be top pro defensive end.
But give us the special inside pass rush we have been looking for. Draft one.
By 1969, the Steelers had done their homework for their 4th overall pick and were prepared to draft with brand new head coach Chuck Noll, who was on the job for less than 24 hours.
Steelers' first round selection, Joe Green, G-R-E-E-N-E.
On the day he was hired, Noll inherited a roster that only had 34% of the players originally drafted or signed as an undrafted rookie by Pittsburgh. Noll and the scouting department would use that 69 draft to change that.
In addition to Joe Green, they got John Kolb, a tackle from Oklahoma State in the 3rd round, who won 4 Super Bowl rings. And then in the 10th round, L.C. Greenwood from Arkansas A&M. A little bit of Bill Nunn first creeping up into the equation.
With more emphasis on scouting, the Steelers started to cover more ground in the late 60s, but it didn't mean that there weren't players still being overlooked. Enter Bill Nunn. As sports editor for the Pittsburgh Courier, which at the time was one of the most prominent black newspapers in the country, Nunn knew all the collegiate stars as well as the gifted players from the historically black colleges who were largely overlooked by most teams.
Well, in the 1960s and 70s, I mean, we as black athletes didn't have a lot of choices to go to major schools, and particularly out of the South.
Every year he had the Pittsburgh Courier All-Americans, and that was a big thing for players who were in these historical black colleges because that was all the recognition we were getting.
You know, Bill, to me, for guys in black colleges, was having a voice in the room. You know, somebody that understood what you were going through.
And so he had carte blanche into the black schools. And as he would share with me, most guys were afraid to go to those schools.
And then he came to work with us, and he was really terrific.
He just knew so much. You know, he'd watch the tape and he could tell guys that how they moved, their feet, their hips, their knees. He could tell that this guy had a chance. This guy's gonna be a player.
Then you go to 1970, the Steelers had the 1st overall pick. They won in the coin flip with the Bears. In the past, that would have been a perfect trade bait for Buddy Parker. They kept the draft pick.
Steelers select Terry Bradshaw, quarterback, Louisiana Tech.
How about that, huh? Woo!
And then in the 3rd round, another little bit of Bill Nunn. They picked a guy named Mel Blount from Southern University who turned into a pretty decent cornerback.
So when I came in, the Steelers had won 1 game and lost 13. I think we won 5 games in 1970. And then we just kept building, kept getting better players.
Yeah, we had a real good draft in 1971. You know, we had a Hall of Famer, Jack Ham.
The foundation of our football team where we could jumpstart the program was in 71. When I was in the 2nd round, we had Jerry Mullins, Larry Brown, who probably was the biggest unsung hero of our football team during that era, who played right tackle for us for like 12 or 13 years, and and Mike Wagner and Ernie Holmes. Great players.
The Steelers finished the 1971 season below 500. There was still work to be done.
Going into the 1972 draft, people were telling me I was going to be drafted. Had no idea what round, what team.
I know Franco there was a debate there.
Bobby Newhouse was the guy that Chuck thought was interesting. He thought Newhouse would be just as good pick as Franco.
There he is again, Franco Harris. Great career.
Franco Harris. We spent hours and hours on this guy.
I question his competitiveness. That's interesting to read this because going into the pros was not a goal of mine. Some of the players on our team, that was their goal.
but it wasn't my goal.
See, that was part of the thing with him, huh?
It could have been the Senior Bowl that helped me. I had a real good, tough game in the Senior Bowl.
The Senior Bowl, impressive blocking in the running game.
Outstanding quickness, elusiveness, and balance, and change of direction.
Bowled over people.
Can go all the way. Strong, hands are good. Remember the Immaculate Reception art.
Broken up by Tatum. Tipped off. Franco Harris has it. And he's over. Franco Harris. Harris, he has much more than that. He'll get 6.
And the Pittsburgh Steelers have done it again, winning their 8th game in a row.
By 1974, momentum was building, the team was winning, and there wasn't anywhere on the map the scouts wouldn't go to find talent. And it was at the small campus of Alabama A&M where none found the steal of the 1974 draft.
There's a, on the other end of campus, the far end of campus, the old stadium, and it's been out of use for a long time, and I think it's still standing. Played a lot of football here in the early years. On the other side over here is where I ran my 40s for Bill Nunn and several other scouts. Was an overcast day, rained the day before, so the field's wet, and not a great day for running the 40 time. My time was not a very good one. I have no idea why, at the time, why Bill stayed around and what excuse he made with the other scouts to stay around, but he did.
The next morning when they woke up, Bill Nunn called whoever, one of the other guys, and pretended to be sick. You know, coughing on the phone or whatever it was, and he said to them, "You guys go ahead, I feel awful, I'm gonna lay here for a little bit." Nunn got in a car, went and found a pair of shoes, went and found John Stallworth.
We went to a local high school not too far from here on a dryer field, and I ran, and didn't know that if my time was any better. Bill didn't say, "Oh, that's great, you did a much better time," he just said it was okay.
And that's what made John Stallworth a player that the Steelers targeted in the 1974 NFL draft.
I got the call and tell me I've been drafted in the 4th round, and that they had taken another receiver ahead of me, a more known receiver ahead of me.
Yards in the game, and they're throwing to Swan for a touchdown. Swan for the score.
You know, the guy that Noel wanted to take was John Stallworth in the 1st round. We said, "You won't get Swan." He said, "Well, I don't care. We'll take Stallworth." I was my obnoxious best. We took Swan first, and Chuck just threw his hands up and he said, "Well, he's gone."
Now the 2nd round's coming up. Chuck still wants John Stallworth. We really didn't draft receivers 1 and 2. It was still a run-first philosophy. There also was a lot of high opinion about Jack Lambert. And the Steelers didn't have a 3rd-round pick, and Chuck really wanted Stallworth. And so he turned to Bill Nunn and said, "Okay, we can pick Lambert here 2nd, but are you going to guarantee me that Stallworth is going to be there in the 4th round?" Bill Nunn was like, "Yeah, sure, you know, okay." He had no idea, but that was the answer that you had to give to get things moving along.
Ended up, you know, the best draft in history.
The marquee draft of '74 with all those guys who got into the Hall of Fame, you know, no question, it meant a lot and got our team over the hump.
As history would write it, the Steelers were poised to go on an unprecedented run, winning 4 Super Bowls in the next 6 seasons.
Harris running wide to the left. Swan into the end zone for the touchdown. Vince Swan on the near side of the field, and we had to go out of our chair because the crowd came right up out of its collective seat. And he's going to Swan, and Swan makes a circus catch in the end zone. Unbelievable catch for the touchdown. He's back to throw. Robin Cole has him in the shoulder and brings him down. Bradshaw pumping, firing downfield. There goes Stallworth. He pulls it in at the 30, the 20, the 10, the 5, and it's a touchdown for Pittsburgh.
Credit goes to everybody in the organization for, you know, us winning those championships.
You look at the talent that we had, you look at the guys that played at virtually every position, they were some of the best in the NFL and the best of the history of the league.
You know, Chuck Noll's philosophy at that time was what he always told Bill Nunn: "You know what athletes are. Bring me athletes, we will coach them into good football players."
They were able to find the talent because they knew what they wanted, they knew what they were looking for. And it was a tremendous run, and the older I get, the more I appreciate it.
Sure, I mean, you know, there's science behind it. When you look at speed, you look at ability, but also timing and a little bit of luck. That really makes it all come together, and we just had that during the 70s.
Lynn Swann, Stallworth, Franco Harris, Terry Bradshaw, Jack Lambert, L.C. Greenwood, keep naming, Mel Blount. They put the team first. And those were the quality of people that Chuck had.
World champ, number one!
Dan Rooney and Chuck Noll agreed to build the team through the draft, and by 1979, from top to bottom, the Steelers' entire roster was made up of players who never wore anything but the black and gold.
Fights his way over the goal line. Franco Harris for a Steeler touchdown. The Pittsburgh Steelers are the champions of the National Football League for the 4th time.
It was never done before, and it's never going to be done again because the league closed.
You know, sometimes things just come together at a certain time. So whatever that formula was, whatever they did, you know, it all came together.